special guest today is Jeremy Newman, a native New Yorker living in the Los Angeles area. He's an athlete, a personal coach and trainer, motivational speaker, calls himself an adrenaline junkie. And just about 10 years ago, coming up this Memorial Day, he was skydiving, the ultimate rush, and he and another individual were falling at 13,000 feet, and a tragic accident happened. Jeremy, tell us what really happened that day. This was not your first jump. You'd been jumping before.
It's true. I actually don't refer to what happened as an accident. I believe that everything happens for a reason. And on this particular day, I was going out on what would have been about my 30th jump. I was jumping with a much more experienced skydiver. He had 30,000 jumps, and I had 30. And we jumped out at 13,000 feet. We did our little routine that we had rehearsed in the air. And at 3,000 feet, we both tracked away from one another, opened up our parachutes, and descended toward the drop zone. And somewhere about 1,500, well, actually, immediately, I noticed that he was moving much faster through the air than I was. And being the competitive adrenaline junkie that I am, I wanted to go faster. And I call this, what I did next, the first of 3 ego malfunctions. When I say ego malfunctions, I'm referring to my own ego. I reached up and tried to collapse the end cells of my parachute.
So that you could go faster?
Correct. And I did. And I successfully collapsed my end cells, and I was traveling faster through the air. But it wasn't fast enough. And I tried to collapse the next set of cells, my second of 3 ego malfunctions. And my entire canopy collapsed at that moment, and I went right back into free fall. I had nothing but a streamer coming down. And at that moment, I was faced with a choice. What we're taught to do is immediately pull your reserve chute to save your life. You deploy your reserve chute, which releases your main. However, as a child, something you don't know about me is that I was a fat little kid I was picked on. The bullies picked on me as a kid, and people didn't want to be my friend. If you were my friend, you got picked on as well, so I was kind of ostracized as a child. And I knew that if I pulled my reserve chute, that once I got to the ground, everyone would ask me what happened. I'd have to tell them I was messing around, trying to go faster, trying to beat the other skydiver down to the ground, and people would look at me and see me as a liability and not want to jump with me, replaying my childhood all over again. So I opted for option B, which was fix the problem. I'm up there kicking and spinning, pulling the lines apart, and it was happening. My cells of my parachute were beginning to open, but it wasn't fast enough.
And this was about 1,200 feet above ground?
My parachute initially collapsed at 1,200 feet, but I was falling at 90 feet per second, roughly, maybe a little less because of the canopy drag. However, pretty fast. And I knew that I had about 30 seconds before I hit the ground. And after about what I thought to be about 10 seconds was a little bit longer than that. And when I went to pull the reserve chute, because I realized this was not going to open fast enough, it was too late. I hit the ground at about 100 miles an hour.
You hit the ground at 100 miles an hour, and you fell almost free fall, 1,200 feet. That's higher than the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, it's actually the height of the Empire State Building.
And you fell all that way. I read somewhere in one of the news clippings that somebody saw you falling and actually called 911.
Correct.
While you were falling.
Yeah, I actually landed in his backyard.
You landed in his backyard. Well, what an appearance. So, I mean, here you are, a young man, bright future, personal coach and trainer, a phenomenal athlete, and now all of a sudden you have fallen 1,200 feet, fallen into somebody's backyard. What happened next? You probably don't know, so what have people told you?
Actually, no, I do know. I was conscious at the time I hit the ground until I got into the helicopter, which I'll explain. I knew that I was in big trouble. And it was almost as if a tape was playing inside my head over and over and over, just keep yourself alive until help gets here. Everything's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. Just keep yourself alive until help gets here. But I couldn't speak because both of my lungs were more than 80% collapsed. And
I heard you had a ruptured aorta and just a number of different major problems.
I have a litany of
the whole
injuries.
system was ready to shut down.
Yeah. The man whose backyard I fell into, he came running over to me and asked me if I was alive, and I was unresponsive. He said, "If you're alive, open your eyes." I then communicated with him by blinking, and I communicated with the paramedics once they arrived by blinking as well. And once I got into the helicopter, I felt safe. I felt like, oh, I'm going to be okay.
You still kind of remember your
Oh yeah,
that
I remember the experience of feeling like I'm holding on, everything, I'm going to be okay, I'm going to be okay. And then once they scooped me up and brought me into the helicopter, I just kind of settled in and I felt I'm okay now. And at that moment, my heart stopped.
That's the first time.
Correct. And they brought me back. I have no memory from that point for almost an entire month. I then was I was air vac'd to
Riverside
Hospital. Sorry, there's a helicopter going overhead at this moment. And I was brought to Riverside Hospital. They assessed my injuries and they knew that they could not handle this kind of trauma. They immediately brought me to Loma Linda.
And we do have a level 1 shock trauma unit here. So they flew in. You're one of those, you came in one of those helicopters that are coming in all the time.
Thank God that you have this trauma unit because I'm here today because of it. They immediately brought me into the operating room and prepped me for emergency surgery. I had a transected aorta, which is the largest blood flow to the body.
And it
was
severed?
I transected me. I had 3 holes that I said popped when I hit the ground at 100 miles an hour. My body stopped moving, but the internal organs continued to move, and eventually something's got to give. And 3 holes popped in my aorta, and I was bleeding out, which is the reason why my heart stopped. And I underwent a 13-hour surgery to repair my aorta. And it was actually the surgery that saved my life is what caused the paralysis and the reason why I've been using a wheelchair for the last 10 years.
So you've been in a wheelchair for 10 years. I mean, but I thought that you died a second time. Your heart stopped a second time or maybe a third time. Was that during surgery, before surgery, after surgery?
It was actually post-surgery. I was on my way up to the intensive care unit from the operating room.
At Loma Linda Medical Center.
Correct. And my heart stopped again. They brought me back down to the operating room. The surgeon who'd been working on me for that length of time performed CPR for 32 minutes in order to bring
you back.
Correct. And his fellow colleagues and nurses could not understand why he was continuing to try and resuscitate me. And from his words, I actually came to Loma Linda several years ago with my mom and met Dr. I forgot his name, doggone it.
Right.
Nonetheless, I met him and he said that he had been in my body for 13 hours and he knew how strong I was. And
because of your great physical conditioning.
Correct.
He determined he was going to fight to save you.
Yeah. And
others were ready to give up because they realized, you know, what a tragic case this was, but it looked like it was impossible.
Personally, I think he was not going to let, you know, his Memorial Day be ruined by, you know, a 13-hour surgery and then have the patient die.
So he persisted. And
absolutely.
For 32 minutes did CPR. So your heart had actually stopped apparently for almost 30 minutes.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was artificially keeping my blood flowing and keeping air going into my lungs. And his colleagues had said, you know, call it. He's going to have no quality of life. He'll be brain dead, confined to a bed for the rest of his life on a ventilator. And he said no, and he brought me back. And my life still hung in the balance. There was no guarantees of what was to come. And that was the predictions initially to my family and friends. That was, you know.
We see his heart's beating. We're not sure about the brain.
Yeah. Well, they actually told my family to prepare for a funeral.
Did they really?
Yeah, because my vital signs were very weak, and it didn't look like they weren't progressing, and I was getting
They weren't
worse.
improving.
No, they're not improving. And but over the course of a day or two, I believe that it improved a little bit, but slowly the predictions were he's going to be on a ventilator for the rest of his life and be unresponsive, a vegetable.
Cautiously, not even optimistic, but very conscious,
Yeah.
saying, hey, the prognosis, he's going to live, but we're not sure about the quality of his life.
Yeah.
Well, you must be a fighter. And the doctor didn't give up. So then I understand that for about a month you were kind of out of it.
Correct. I was in what I refer to as a drug-induced coma.
They just kept you down.
Yeah, I have no memories for an entire month.
Well, then what happened when you do come out of this and you begin to become aware of what had happened? I mean, here's, your whole future is changed radically. You're not able to move from the waist down, paralyzed.
I was weak. I mean,
could hardly move anything.
yeah, I didn't even have enough strength to literally lift my head off the pillow. I was so weak.
But are you cognizant of your condition at this point?
I asked questions. Actually, my mother told me that my first question that I asked while I was on a ventilator was, how is the other guy?
So
I didn't know what happened.
You were concerned.
Yeah.
It must have been some kind of an accident.
I thought that something
happened.
At the time, I thought that maybe a dust devil, one of those little mini tornadoes that happen out in the desert out here, took me down and maybe hurt him as well. And I asked how he was doing, and they let me know that he was okay.
Was he one of the first ones to you?
He actually landed a mile away from me.
Oh, he did?
Because he was in flight to the drop zone, but my canopy collapsed at 1,200 feet, and I just went straight down.
Okay, so you never did catch him then.
No.
You never
But it is a way. Excuse me. It is a race that I won, but it is also a race that I lost.
You mean you beat him to the ground?
I beat him to the ground.
You beat him to the ground, but yeah, you did it the hard way.
Yes.
Well, so tell me what's happened. I mean, you had a very promising career ahead of you, and all of a sudden you've had this terrible accident. How are you responding emotionally and physically and spiritually to this whole event? I mean, people become bitter very quickly over something like this.
There definitely was a period of time that I
Why me?
absolutely questioned, why did this happen? I couldn't understand. I didn't have an explanation. No one else did either. But initially I blamed God. I thought, how in the world can God put me through this?
A loving God allows something like that to happen.
Yeah, a loving God doesn't do this, but I didn't know the whole story. I didn't realize the story that I just told you about how I was the cause of the...
You've gone back and kind of analyzed it, and you talked about these three ego
Exactly, malfunctions.
Malfunctions.
Over and over, I've replayed it, and I now know because it's very clear to me what happened. However, I was very bitter and angry, but not all the time. I was still my jovial self, but sometimes the pain would get the better of me, or just I would become frustrated with the fact that my life was turned upside down and I had no control over anything that was happening in my life.
Lost control of everything, virtually everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even my health was being cared for by nurses and doctors. I couldn't even care for myself. And it was very humbling. And it wasn't a place that I was comfortable being in or ready to be in, but I was forced into it. And my mother, I love my mother. She is my saving grace, and as a result of her observation, she sat down on my hospital bed after I had really pushed people away from me, my family, friends, hospital staff.
Just kind of push them away. Don't
leave
bother
me alone.
Leave me alone.
I don't want to be with you. Just leave me alone. And people were showing up every day to be with me, and it was great. But I couldn't handle it at times. She sat down on my hospital bed and she said, Jeremy, you have a choice. You can lay in this hospital bed and live the rest of your life being angry, bitter, and alone. Or you can turn this into something positive and inspire people.
Wow, what a mother.
Yeah.
So, and you weren't ready to hear that, I'm sure.
No, no, I actually asked her to leave. And
Upset with her,
well,
trying to tell you what
I couldn't.
she didn't understand.
Exactly. How can you possibly understand what I'm going through? Well, the next morning I woke up and the words of my mother were resounding in my head.
Playing, replaying.
Yeah. And I knew that I had a choice at that moment. You know, I had interactions with the nurse, and she walked out of the room because I was being nasty.
The nurse did?
The nurse did. And I knew at that moment that my life had to change. Otherwise, I was going to be, just as she said, angry, bitter, and alone. And that was the turning point that took place in my life. And from that point on, and even still till today, I'm consciously making choices that are in my best interest and others.
So that was 10 years ago. How long after the accident did your mother talk to you? You remember what the time sequence? I mean, was it in the first few months, or?
No, it was definitely. Well, yeah, I was in the hospital, so it was about a month and a half. I had another 15 or so days in the hospital before I was discharged. That I was actively choosing to be positive.
So you begin a journey of hope.
Yeah.
And you're still on that journey. Tell me what happened. I read some of the press clippings, and it seems like I read almost a year later that you were skiing, but I think within a month or two you were in some kind of an event.
Yes.
What was that?
I did my first 5-kilometer race about a month and a half after I was released from the hospital.
A month and a half after you're released.
2.5 months I was in the hospital.
A 5K.
Yeah.
So you did this with a wheelchair.
I did. I actually did it in an everyday chair like this one. And I just pushed up this incredible race, and it was exhilarating. And less than 6 months later, I did my first triathlon.
And a triathlon is 3 events.
Triathlon is a combination of swimming, biking, and running. And the picture that we're looking at is me coming into the finish line of the World Championships in Madeira, Portugal, and I'm on the U.S. team. And the picture just a second ago was me coming into the finish line at the Malibu Triathlon.
So you've been apparently traveling all around the world. Did I hear 20 or 15, 20 different countries you've been involved in now?
Yes, I've
traveling around the world.
Yeah.
As an ambassador?
It's true. I don't just travel as an athlete. I travel also as a motivational speaker. And oftentimes I like to group them together. If I have a race that I'm doing in another country or anywhere, I like to coordinate having a speaking engagement or more to go along with it.
Well, there's a number of different slides that we've taken a look at, and you've been literally around the world. I see the shirt that you're wearing right there is the Hungary Triathlon team. Tell me what you have on your wrists there.
This was my most recent trip was I was in Colombia, South America, and I had a race in the northern part of Colombia, in Eje Cafetero, which is in Pareda, which is just a beautiful, the region where they make coffee in Colombia. And I had 5 speaking engagements while in Colombia, both in the north and also in the south. I spoke in different places, and one of the audience members, after I had spoken, he came up to me and he tied this around my wrist. And I was so moved. I was crying. It was beautiful. And then one day we were in this other region, and a street performer tied this one. He had these little threads, and he wove this thing around my wrist, and they've been there ever since.
So, what are you doing now? The bio indicated that you're a motivational speaker. Are you still training? Are you still being a coach for people?
Yes.
I mean, I read one clipping where one of the people that you're working with, you know, the fact that you fell 1,200 feet and got up, that kind of impresses them. They need to do one more rap or whatever else it is, that you're a kind of a hard driver, but they can't complain because they know who they're dealing with.
It's true. I have to say that just by me showing up and being there, the fact that I'm in a wheelchair and I'm showing up at the gym to train you is, you know, I hear from people that is like, wow, if this guy in a wheelchair is going to be at the gym and waiting for me at 5:30 in the morning, the least I can do is be there as well, and do the kinds of exercises that he's showing me, and eat the way in which he's explaining me to eat, and drink water, and living healthier, oftentimes I don't have to say anything. I'm just being, and it impacts people in a positive way, and that is very rewarding for me.
So you have a number of different clients that you work with?
Yes, I have clients that I work with in both Los Angeles. I travel also to work with people. I have celebrities that I work with, and they have me fly to New York, to Hawaii, to different places and work with them, as well as the people that I work with here in Los Angeles or here in California.
So after the accident, looking back on that accident and looking at where you are today, what can you tell the audience? Because there are other people that have gone through some kind of a traumatic injury or accident or been confronted with the disease. What can you share with them about your experience?
If there was one thing that I would share with people, is that it doesn't necessarily take a seemingly tragic episode to occur in one's life to shift in a positive direction. However, if and when something does tragically happen, or seemingly tragic happen, it doesn't mean it's the end of your life. For me, it was the beginning of my life. And
this tragic accident, you're looking back as a beginning.
Oh yeah, I refer to what the date of May 24th coming up as my rebirth day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because a whole new life ahead of you,
Yeah.
new focus, new direction, making an impact upon not only Jeremy, but making an impact upon other people and other people's lives. And tell me about some of the events that you've been in. We may have one or two other slides here we can take a look at.
I've done a lot of racing and a lot of different kinds of sporting events. I've triathlons, duathlons, biathlons, lots and lots of marathons. I also have been skiing. This picture is of me at the finish line in Padova, Italy. And
now, is that a motorized bike there?
That's actually it's called a hand cycle. It's a bicycle that's propelled with the hands, and those little handles that are just above my leg is what I use to propel myself forward.
Now, do you have the use of your legs?
No. Well, at that time I did not.
So it's kind of a hand.
Correct. It's all upper body strength moving the machine and me. And that's actually the starting line of the event.
Looks like there's a lot of people involved there.
Yeah, there's about 75 wheelchair athletes, and that's me down in the right front corner.
And how long event was this?
This was a marathon.
A regular marathon.
Yeah.
You mean like
26.2 miles.
2 miles.
This was my first time ever having encountered cobblestones. It was very interesting.
With a wheelchair.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
A hand cycle, I mean.
Yeah, in the hand cycle, and it was very interesting because it was like, at first it felt like a massage, and then it felt like an earthquake, and then it was like someone beating me up. After about 15, 20 miles, it wasn't so pleasant, but it was an amazing event. And this was my first time skiing back in 1998, I think.
1 year after the accident.
Yeah, a year after
In Colorado?
This was at the Hartford Ski Spectacular. I was in Breckenridge, Colorado, relearning how to ski as an adaptive skier. I'd been skiing since I was 6 years old as an able-bodied skier, but this was new for me, and it was really exciting and amazing.
Are you still skiing?
Oh yeah, I just was skiing. I was actually up in Vail just a week before I went to Columbia, and I did some things that that I don't think that I would have done as an able-bodied skier, going off unbelievable cliffs and flying through the air.
So you've been all around the world in multiple events, and when you talk about a triathlon, you're talking about, which is normally a race, followed by a bike ride, followed by a swim. So do you do the swim also?
Yeah, actually, just 3 days ago, I participated in what would be considered the Woodstock of triathlons in Monterey County. It's the Wildflower Triathlon Series. And it's a 1 mile swim in the Lake San Antonio. It's a it's a 1.5K swim, a 40K bike ride, and then a 10K run.
That's a pretty complete race.
It is. And the Wildflower race is very challenging. It's all hills, and it is really challenging. 4 days later, I'm still sore.
Jeremy, in the closing moments, tell us about the continuing miracles taking place in your life.
Well, Lynn, just over a year ago, I am learning how to walk. And I walked the last 200 yards of the New York City Marathon and have since walked the last 1,200 yards of the Miami Marathon.
God is not through with you yet.
No.
I know that He's going to continue guiding and directing and leading you as you make an impact upon other people's lives. You are one of those individuals that have refused to give up. You're making an impact, and I know that God is going to continue to give you dreams. When is your next event?
This weekend, I will be racing in the Santa Barbara Wine Country Half Marathon. It's all mountains as well.
So that's a
13.1 mile marathon.
A regular marathon.
Yeah.
And you're
Well, it's a half marathon, but
Okay.
it's because it's all hills. It's more like a double marathon.
Okay, well, I know that God is going to continue to bless you. I want to thank you for being on our program. And I know that possibly some of the people here in the audience here will be making contact with you as a motivational speaker.
I'm always available. You can email me or call me.
And you travel around the world.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Lynn.
Really appreciate it. God
Thank you for
bless
having
you.
me.
Okay.